Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery, and today excited to have Yuri Zaremba, who's the CEO of AISDR, which creates and sends personalized sales emails at scale. And once a prospective customer engages, it corresponds with them automatically, which automates the SDR task by managing both inbound and outbound communication tracks at 10% of full-time SDR cost. Welcome to the show, Yuri.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me, Rohit. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. So you have had quite a journey. You've been in the Y Combinator. You've been an entrepreneur earlier. And how did you get your start in startups, and what got you excited in this crazy world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I think there are kind of a couple elements to it. First, my father was an entrepreneur, right? So I kind of saw this example in my life. But and I always kind of had this notion that you get successful in life by owning companies, right?
Yeah.
But I was scared to start a company myself. So instead, I became a lawyer because for those of you who don't know, in a law firm, you basically can work your way to becoming a partner and then have like an equity
Yeah.
portion of the company, right? And I thought like, oh, this is a great hack, right? Like you can work and then become an owner. So like win-win. But like somewhere midway, right, in that journey when I was working for like 5, 6 years, I had an idea for my first company called AXDraft because I constantly had to like create legal documents and like copy paste different parts. I'm like, ah, this is so annoying, right? So I decided to create a product, did that with my brother. And at that point, like I started pushing it forward. I'm like, oh my God, this is interesting, right? But it's not gonna go anywhere if I don't like dive into it and like dedicate all my time to it. I can't do this part-time and get to like a meaningful result, meaningful progress. And when I had that realization, I said to myself, like, okay, like you owe this idea, right, to give it a shot, right? And I actually like made a deal with myself and my employer at that point of time to say, like, I'm gonna quit. And if I don't get it off the ground in a year, you're gonna take me back, okay? Right. And
Nice.
I quit and I started the company and I never came back, right? But basically those kind of three elements. The example of my father, right? The fact that I knew that if you want to like be successful, you have to own things, not kind of work for somebody. And the third thing is like when I had an idea that kind of got me over the hill to like make a leap of faith and kind of get started.
Interesting. And was AXDraft more about making it easier for legal firms and lawyers to draft and in for legal documents? Was or what was the problem that you were trying to solve there?
Yeah, so it was automation of creation of legal documents, right? So
Yeah.
basically, that's how it started. Because when I was a lawyer, it took me like 6 hours to build a like first draft contract. And the way I did it, I opened like 10 templates and then I copy pasted different pieces together, right? And essentially what I thought of like, hey, can I have a library where I just say like, use this, and this clause, and then just like get a contract in 5 minutes instead of 5 hours. So that's what AXDraft was about, and that's how it started. And then later on, through like many iterations and many years later, it turned into like a full cycle contract life cycle management solution where we could like create documents, send them for approval, collaborate on them, store them, search them. I can only imagine like what it would have transformed into now with the age of AI if we haven't solved it, right? Because what's happening now is insane, but that's a separate story.
Yeah, I was coming to that. I mean, the AI firms in the legal space has become very competitive. So I thought your next venture would be around that. But you sold off the company in 2020 to on it.
Yes.
Got it. And how was the YC experience? I've got a couple of YC founders, but this you were on YC before the COVID happened, right? So how was the experience for you?
Yeah, so I think our partner for in YC was Gustav Alstromer, right? And basically, he told me like you were lucky to be probably in the best two batches of YC right?
Nice.
That I remember, right? So our first one was in winter 2019. It was right before COVID. It was transformative, right? So we got in on a third application. The way I discovered YC was because I thought that this is like a school for startups, right? And you basically learn how to do startups. I was proven wrong on many levels, but it kind of changed the trajectory of my company, right? Because I'm originally from Ukraine.
Yeah.
Basically, I started fundraising in Ukraine, right? Then I fundraised a little bit kind of in Europe, but then I got into Y Combinator and I realized like, what is it actually that people write books about, right? Like, what is this venture capital? What is this kind of seed stage funding, Series A funding, this speed of iteration? Like the Silicon Valley has its magic, like you cannot deny it. And there is a distortion field that does not exist anywhere else on Earth, right? To give you a very specific reference point, in Europe, for my first company, when I was talking to investors, they were like, this sounds interesting. Like we're probably gonna give you like $200,000-300,000, and like we could probably value your company at around like million, maybe 1.5 million. We give you like a lot of premiums, right? And then I go to YC, like I don't know, 2 months later, and they're like, how much you're raising? Like, well, I'm raising 1 million. Million? Like, why not two? Right? Like, what's your valuation? I'm like 10, like 10, like why not 20? Right? And basically raised like 1.5 on 10 at that point of time. And which essentially was 10x compared to what I was offered in Europe with pretty much the same founders, same metrics, same customer base, right? And it was insane.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And what was your reason to sell the company in 2020?
Yeah, so multiple reasons, right? The first thing was that we received a whole bunch of inbound offers,
Okay.
right? So COVID started and money became cheap,
Yeah.
and equity-backed companies started looking for things to buy, right?
Mm.
And we received, I think, like 4 inbound offers from different players in the space. And because I was an M&A lawyer before that, I'm like, this is a good time to sell, right? Like when you have multiple bidders, like you should monetize on that. And then the other element to it was that when I started AXDraft, I was like, we are gonna disrupt this like 30 billion legal industry. This is wrong, right? Like, the legal tech companies do not disrupt the legal industry because it's a separate kind of beast. And actually what they are doing, they're fighting with other legal tech companies, which is like a much, much smaller market. And I realized that like 3 years into the journey and realized that like you really cannot build like $1 billion company in this space just because the space is too small.
Mm.
And when I kind of put all of those things together, I'm like, great, like this is a great chance to kind of exit, right? And see what happens next.
Correct. I mean, it's interesting you got this M&A experience, but do you think most companies should think about exit when they're getting incoming offers, or what should be the rationale when you're looking to exit out?
That's a great question. And I think there is no like good answer. Uh,
Okay.
I think there are a few fundamental truths. First is that companies, like if you want to have good terms, so companies get bought, not sold, right? So you cannot say like this company is for sale, right?
Yeah.
Like, please buy me, right? Because then you're desperate, right? And it's like fundraising. If you say like, please give me money, like nobody's going to give you money, right? So don't do that. That would be kind of my first advice. And then when you do have incoming offers, then you have to like think, okay, do I have a plan how to make this company much more successful, right? Do I
Yeah.
have resources to make this company much more successful? And then, like, what do I want to do personally? Like, do I want to retire? Do I want to still hustle? Do I want to still like become a billion-dollar founder? And then consider all of those things and then make your own choice. Something that I read just a couple days ago from Jason Lemkin that really stuck with me is that
Yeah.
he wrote a post saying like, previously, when founders came to me with advice, asking for advice about like, should they sell, I used to say no, right? Like you always should like push until you win. But now I'm reconsidering it because sometimes that second good offer never comes.
Mm.
And basically what you should think about when you have your first good offer is gonna consider all those elements that I discussed before, and then decide like, hey, should I take this? Assuming that there will be no second better offer sometime in the future.
Got it. Yeah, no, I think it's super interesting. Maybe also because SaaS has had a hard time since 2021. We just had three IPOs, but hopefully with in 2025 we're going to have a slew of IPOs, and I hope the M&A market is also going to open up. But referring back to a previous point, there's been slew of AI startups focusing on legal. If you think the market is small, why are there so many AI startups in the legal space now?
Because it's obvious and done by not lawyers, right?
Oh,
So basically, what we're seeing now in the AI space is very interesting in a sense that you have this tech guys, right, like engineers, going into industry they mostly have no idea about,
yeah.
adopting them with AI, right? Like,
Mm.
oh, like AI is gonna rewrite, like it's gonna write legal documents for you, it's gonna review legal documents for you, it's gonna take legal notes for you, like we're gonna fix it all, Gen AI, right? But then when they start selling this software to like actual users, turns out they might not be buying, they might not be willing to pay as much, they might be churning so often. Because when you talk specifically about legal software, what you need to understand is that people pay money not for legal advice, not for legal document, they pay money for sharing the liability,
Mm.
right? So basically, when I have hired like $1,000 per hour law firm on my $1 billion deal or even $10 million deal, when something goes wrong, I'm going to go and sue them,
Yeah.
and they will compensate out of their professional liability budget. What happens if a red line on my $10 million contract was done by AI and it was wrong?
Mm.
Will you sue the AI legal tech company? Will you sue OpenAI? Right? Like who takes liability for that? And basically all the current AI legal tech companies make this like really nice footnote at the bottom saying like, we bear no legal liability. This is just advice, right? Like don't take it seriously. And that
Right.
kind of evaporates most of the value of legal services for anyone other than earliest stage startup founders who like don't care, right?
Mm.
and and that's that's a much smaller subset. And kind of founders who are outside of law don't get that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. And you moved on from the company, and now you build AISDR. But why did you choose this market? And how did the journey start for you?
Yeah, so I always choose to work on problems I know, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
basically with legal, I knew law, so I decided to work on that problem. But after becoming a founder and basically being a founder of AXDraft for like 6+ years, most of what I was doing was sales, right?
Yeah.
Like selling founder-led. Then when we became bigger, hiring salespeople, managing salespeople, hiring SDRs, firing SDRs, building campaigns, monitoring, iterating. And I learned a lot of stuff about that, right? And when I saw that with generative AI, you can create an email that is better than most of what I've seen many people writing.
Yeah.
And the thing that really like got me super excited was the fact that with Gen AI, you can have a perfect speed to lead, right? Like somebody signs up, like you instantly reach out with a nice personalized tailored email. Somebody responds, you instantly engage in a conversation, right? And that kind of speed to lead makes a difference between a lead converting and not converting, right? Like up to 40% higher conversion rate if you engage in less than 10 minutes, right? And with AI, that became possible. And when I realized that, I'm like, this is great. Like I still have it in me. I have experience. This is a disruptive technology. I know this space. I'm going to go and build a new company.
Got it. And you again choose Y Combinator for your second. Yeah.
Always, right? So like I had a network of investors who I can like go and raise money, but I just love that community so much, and the network and the power and the investors. And like I remember distinctly when I got a call from them that we got accepted with AISDR. I'm like, I'm home, right?
Hmm.
Like this was so great. I think that if further down the road, I don't know, I start a third company for whatever reason, like
Yeah.
I would still go through Y Combinator.
Okay, got it. Interesting. And before the call, I talked about how I've been into sales, BD partnerships. But even if you're at a VP sales role and you're getting in very early in a tech startup, you're doing a lot of SDR work just to understand, about who your customers and ICP. And there's a lot of concern about AI replacing sales roles. So, how do you see AI impacting sales jobs, and what sort of new roles might be merge as AI tools like ASDR would advance?
Yeah. I think first of all, nobody knows a good answer to that question right now. We're all just kind of like guessing all over the place. But my short-term kind of assumption, right? Like what's going to happen in the next, I would say like 12 to 18 months
Hmm.
is that the pure kind of SDR role will be distilled to a cold call focused role, which will
Okay.
basically there will be two types of setup. Setup number one is an industry that is kind of very cold call intensive, right? Or it's important for them because there are a lot of voice agents, but if you talk to them, you get like it's not there yet, right?
Yeah, it's not.
So basically you will have AI SDR reaching out via like email plus LinkedIn plus maybe some other channels. And then it will score like highest engaged leads. And then we'll give you a call list with like validated, like pre-validated, like maybe pre-called numbers. You will give them a call to get them over the finish line. So that's going to be scenario number one. And then scenario number two is going to be basically a full cycle AE who is still
Yeah.
doing their own rounds, but then kind of an AI SDR running hand in hand in them with them, making sure that they don't have this asymmetric kind of curve of oh, I'm building pipeline and closing deals, I'm building pipeline and closing deals,
Yeah.
right? And it's more kind of even because AI SDR is working full time kind of on the back end. People will still be closing deals. Like that. This is going to be, I think, the situation for the next 2 years, maybe. But
Okay.
then we're talking about everything becoming agentic, right? And then we're talking about like super intelligence
Yeah.
in 2 years, right? I don't know what's going to happen in the age of super intelligence. Maybe people will just stop buying stuff, right? Because we don't need that. Um,
Yeah.
honestly, like none of us can comprehend that. But assuming people are still buying stuff and super intelligence like super expensive, what I would expect is basically the sales process becoming more AI driven in the sense that things that are self-serve today will grow in check size because you will be able to learn more without actually talking to a human, right? So
Yeah.
basically AI demo avatars who will answer questions specifically to your request, AI demo walkthroughs, etc. And then you learn from that, and then you make a buying decision. And what is now like, I don't know, an under 5K ACV self-serve process becomes like an under 20K ACV self-serve process
Okay.
enabled by AI. And then what's going to happen there, and I think this is inevitable at this point of time, is there will be like a buyer AI, right? Which is basically going to be pre-screening all the offers and then giving you a short list of like 5, 10 products. And there will be kind of two things driving towards that buyer element. The first one is the fact that there will be so much kind of outreach because AI multiplies that. But another very important thing is that I think there will be an explosion in offerings, right? Because AI enables product creation, right, at low cost and low skill, if you can say so, right? And essentially people will be able to choose not from 10, but like 100 vendors, which will have
Yeah.
like different pricing points, and it will be difficult to choose. So you will need to have an assistant for that.
Interesting. But you think cold calling will still be there
For now, right?
for now?
I can easily imagine that kind of AI voice agents will get there in terms of quality in the next like 12 months or so. And then cold calling is also going to be replaced. But I think at that point of time, what's going to happen is that people will stop taking calls at all, right? And
Interesting.
essentially, uh, because like robotic cold calls is a very intrusive, right? Because it's a phone call and we cannot ignore that. And B, unlimited.
Yeah.
So, and I imagine easily that kind of one of two things are going to happen. First is um, carriers or providers like Apple will just detect and block. You will have like a trusted contact list, and that those will be the only ones that will be getting through, like no one else at all, like your favorites in Apple contact book, right? Or people will start calling through not phone, right? Like basically WhatsApp calls, right? Or like Facebook calls, which are guarded by the platform owners, right?
Mm.
Who are already blocking it. So I think that's how it's going to go.
Got it. Interesting. And especially for SDRs and sales guys, how do you find that balance between automation and genuine personalization? I think in the last 2 years, uh, the personalization has improved, but how do you find that balance? Should every email be personalized? You should look into their LinkedIn profiles and do that sort of research, or do you think that balance is going to come in the next 12 to 18 months?
So I've seen very different flavors of that, right? So we have customers who write this like 50-word emails, which is like
Mm.
one sentence personalization, and maybe personalization in the PS, which is now
Yeah.
considered to be like the signature move of AI. But I also have a customer who writes this like 3-paragraph, like half a page emails,
Yeah.
where like 2 of those 3 paragraphs is a life story of a prospect.
Mm.
And I told them like, don't do that. Like, this is weird. And they like, it's gonna work. It's gonna work. Like, just do it. And honestly, it does work, right? So like 50 emails sent, 2 meetings booked, right? Which is
Yeah.
insane
Yeah.
to me. And therefore, I think there is no kind of good answer to your question. But on the meta level, what is fundamentally true is that personalization relevance matter much less than a good understanding of your audience and an offer that would resonate with that audience, right?
Mm.
If you write a very plain email saying that like, hey, my name is Yuri, I'm like I'm gonna give you $100,000 to help you grow your startup just because I'm feeling like out of my philanthropic um, interest, right? I will get a lot of responses to that email, a lot of responses, right? Maybe some
Yeah.
people won't respond because it sounds like scam, right? But when
Yeah.
they check me on LinkedIn, right, they would see that I'm not a Nigerian prince, right? And therefore, kind of will engage with the email pretty fast.
Interesting. And when it comes to AI-driven sales tools, what metrics matter to you in looking at what is success? Do you think metrics like reply and open rates are still relevant?
So reply rate is definitely relevant. Open rate is less relevant these days, especially with the latest Google updates where they give you like this huge banner, like this is spam. Um, reply rate is relevant because reply rate basically shows you whether the email is delivering and whether people care to at least some extent, right? Because if
Right.
we have a campaign and we're not getting like not interested replies, something is wrong, right? So it's still kind of a good signal. But then obviously the metric that really matters is meetings booked, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we track. And then later down the road, what I definitely will be tracking is conversion to revenue closed, because that's the ultimate goal.
Correct. Yeah. Because, what I've seen is a lot of SDRs don't want to remain SDRs. They would want to, after 2 or 3 years, want to get into the AE role. Uh, but I mean, when I initially take on a job, I do a lot of cold calling just to understand the product, how to sell it so that I can tell it to my teams later on. I really like that metric of conversion to revenue book, because then it, gets to know if the revenue is high quality or not. And I've been into startups where I have built playbooks, or I've had founders who build the playbooks. So, what do you think, should the head of sales or the head of BD, should they be making the sales playbook, or do you think the founder should be building the sales playbook?
So when I was a founder, the first time I was building the sales playbook,
Okay,
right? And I think there is, as with most things in startups, there is iteration and evolution, right? I think the sales playbook should come from someone who has the most experience selling this, right?
got it.
In all cases, right, at the beginning, it is a founder, right? And being able to kind of sit down and codify in a structured way, like, this is what I did, this is what worked, is going to be very helpful to your first few sales hires, right? But
Yeah,
then when the transition happens, things will start breaking, because like a founder can say like, no, we don't have this feature, but next week we're going to build it, right? The sales rep cannot do that. And essentially they will be adding kind of more elements to it. And then at some point of time, when you basically hire your first VP of sales, it should take everything that you kind of scribbled in your notebook for the past like year or two or whatever, and then turn it into something that is structured, scalable, and easy to replicate, right? And that's going to be the kind of iteration of your sales playbooks.
interesting. I just want to follow up on what you said. Like, if when you've done founder led sales, Jason Lemkin says like you should hire two SDRs, junior sales reps. But I've been in a situation where I was hired after the founder as a VP sales. So what should a founder do, especially somebody who's got a bit of a product market fit and he wants to move away from founder, wants to uh, coach and expand their sales. Should they hire a VP of sales, or should they hire two SDRs like what Jason says?
So not an expert in this, right? My personal take is that you can't skip steps,
Mm,
right? So for example, if you've been doing founder-led sales and now you have hired a VP of sales who is hiring sales reps and training them, how would you know if that VP of sales is doing a good job or not?
yeah.
If you never did that yourself, right?
Mm,
If you never kind of tried to train, transition, etc., right? Potentially, right? You can find like a stellar person who knows much more than you do about everything and just like gets it right immediately. But I think it's very difficult to do in if you're building things that nobody else did before, right?
yeah.
And even if you're hiring like, or especially if you're hiring from like an incumbent, right? So I imagine companies in my space would hire like a VP of sales from like Apollo or Outreach and would rely on them to like figure things out. But their experience is completely irrelevant, because potentially when they came in, they had like the power of the brand behind them. They had
Mm,
this like sales and marketing machine just like feeding them leads to figure things to like close them. And then they come to your startup and none of that exists, right?
yeah.
Are they equipped to figure it out for you? Unlikely.
Yeah. Interesting. And especially for this is for SDRs and A's. Well, A's especially. If what are some of the ways if you can increase urgency in a deal cycle?
So different things, right? I think ultimately it kind of boils down to talking to your customer and trying and feeling your customer, like what matters to them. Because there are simple tricks like promos, being
Yeah.
honest that like you have to hit your goal, and basically being flexible with like billing start date, or giving them like a free month, or like the usual tricks of the trade. But there are some fundamentally kind of interesting things that you can only learn through deep conversation with your champion, right? So
Yeah.
a very good example that I have from my kind of previous company is we had a deal with an insurance company in Canada that was stuck for, I don't know, like 6 months.
Okay.
And then I follow up and I follow up, and it's basically always, oh, sorry, like we're still reviewing, we're still reviewing, we're still reviewing. And I'm like, and I need to close because it's like end of year, the usual thing. And I ask, I like remove all the people from the copy, right? And I just like reach out to like one person who I know likes me the most. And I'm like, who can I talk to fix this, right? Like, who can I talk to like sign it this month? And she
Interesting.
gives me the name and the email address. And that's a person who I have never ever talked before, right? So there is like a key stakeholder in my deal, right? And I never spoke to them. And I email that person and I tell basically like, hey, my name is Yuri. Like, I'm the founder of AXDraft. We never met for some reason, but like, I really need this deal signed this month. And I want to talk to you to understand what I can do to get this done. Like, here's my cell. And she called me and we have a call and like we jump on a call, we click instantly. And she's like, actually, like the biggest problem that I'm concerned is like, I'm afraid that you give us this limit on documents. And then if we go over, like my entire like software, my entire kind of process is going to stop because I will be relying on your software to generate all my kind of insurance documents. And I don't know exactly what will be the number of insurance kind of policies I need to generate next year. And my kind of estimation and projecting department is still figuring that out. And I'm like, glad that you mentioned, right? Let me put this one sentence saying that, like, if you go over, I will never stop basically the billing, the processing, and then in the worst case scenario, we will charge you for overage. But if you renew, we will. If you renew for the next year, we will ignore any overage and then just renew for the kind of amount, for the increased amount kind of for the next year. And like, you could do that? I'm like, of course I can do that, right? I'm a founder, right? I can
Yeah.
decide anything. And we signed like 2 days later.
Nice.
So there is no way to kind of do that, something like that, until you like drill really into the details of what's the problem.
Interesting. So the champion got you connected to the decision maker who's not there in that meeting earlier. Interesting.
Yeah. Not just to the decision maker, to the blocking decision maker,
To
right?
the
Because
blocking. Yeah.
there were like 10 people and everyone has signed off except that one person.
Mhm. Interesting. And especially, when it comes to sometimes, closing that deal, reps would discount. So my question is, should reps be discounting? And, when is it appropriate to discount?
I think it's a question of the like company policy, right? So we discount sometime, right? But I wouldn't say that we discount, right? So again, we never discount, but we give more volume, right? So essentially, there is one of my favorite concepts in negotiations. You should trade items of unequal value, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, for you, the true value is dollar amount of ARR you get from a contract, right?
Yeah.
For the customer, the item of value is sometimes the dollar amount, but sometimes is actually what they can get out of the system. And you can say that, yeah, this costs like $1,000 a month, right? Or $10,000 a month or 100K a year. And they're like, I don't know. And you can then say, but if you sign this month, I'm going to give you like 2x the number of licenses, right? Because licenses cost zero on your end. It's just like clicking 10 buttons on the kind of admin side of the software, right? Or like, I'm going to give you premium customer support, and that's just name because everyone gets the same premium 24/7 customer support. Or I give you something else, right? So discounting is simple, right? Too simple. And I would usually advise against it and try to find the way to trade these items of an equal value. Like, what can I do that costs me zero, but will be valuable for a customer?
Got it. Interesting. And we've had companies like HubSpot who focus on SMB. I think SMB works, but when is the right time to move into enterprise?
When you're ready as a product, right?
Right.
So, for example, currently AISDR is like super focused on SMB because we are like a relatively early stage startup, right? We integrate kind of with the entire tool stack for the SMB. We're not SOC 2 Type 2 certified, although that is coming soon, right? Because we want to be able to play in those upmarket deals. But for us, that means Marketo, Salesforce, SOC 2 Type 2, right? And many other things. And also sales reps who know how to sell into enterprise, because that's a totally different motion that is more kind of relationship based and in-person meetings based and like sponsoring events, right? So you
Yeah.
have to understand that balance, that it's not that one day you decide like, oh, I've been selling to like small companies, but like tomorrow I'm going to close Salesforce, right?
Mm.
You can't do that. You have to be product ready, team ready, and budget ready, right? You have to be able to spend more to land those like seven-figure deals.
Mm. Got it. Got it. Interesting. And when it comes to hiring, what are some of the top signals that a candidate will make for an amazing sales rep? This is especially for founders who are looking to hire the first sales rep.
So one rule that I like a lot is, would I buy from this person?
Mm.
Right? And if the answer is no, like don't hire.
Mm.
And second is what kind of questions people are asking, right?
Mm.
So when people are asking questions about like, um, how often do you how many of your reps like close quota? Like how many of leads are like inbound versus like hunt yourself? Um, what's your vacation policy, right? And kind of things like that. Those are totally normal questions to ask, totally normal, right? And I actually strongly recommend everyone looking for an account executive job to ask questions about like quota attainment, things like that, but in a bit more mature companies that have established processes and can answer the question. And essentially, you are evaluating like, can I be successful in that company? For a startup, you have to look for a person who is an entrepreneur more than a salesperson, who is like
Mm.
so hungry, so curious, so wild and inventive that like it doesn't matter for them whether you've been successful before, whether they have to hunt their own leads or whether those are inbound. They are just curious to like get the product and get it to market, and how it's going to happen. Like they trust themselves to figure it out, right? So
Mm.
like those unreasonably ambitious, hungry people like would be the best candidates for the kind of early stage startup sales roles, in my opinion, and they are very hard to come by.
Mm.
This kind of in this environment, I would also look for people who are investing in their own personal brand, right? So basically, when they're building out their like LinkedIn following, etc. So because that helps with sales as well. But do not hire people who only invest in their personal brand, because that's also spells trouble.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And when it comes to growing your channels, what sort of channel partnerships are you doing, and what sort of uh, different growth strategies are you doing to grow more awareness and get more leads in for ASDR?
So for now, we're pretty, I would say, non-aggressive in that way, right? So we invest in kind of more long-term things. We invest a lot
Right.
into content. We invest a lot into like personal brand development. We have a really good name that works really well for us in terms of kind of organic search results.
Yeah.
And we are just established a partnership program and where we basically look for companies who are like sales consultants, marketing consultants, CRM integration consultants, where AISDR would be a good fit to kind of plug in. And we give them a generous revenue share to basically make them part of our stack. It's in the early days. We're still kind of figuring things out, but I think this is going to be a big element of what we're going to be doing in the future.
Got it. And I recently read an article about from Jason Lincoln where he said that AI is eating into SaaS margins, and I think going forward, a lot of VCs are investing more into AI, but not into SaaS because it looks like it's more looks like a PE multiple, PE sort of investment for SaaS companies. But for SaaS founders who want to incorporate AI or AI SDR tools, what would they need to do, and what do you think are the biggest mistakes to avoid?
So biggest mistake to avoid is to try to build in AI just because people kind of talk about it.
Yeah.
That's like the number one biggest mistake to avoid. And then in the end of the day, you have to look for actual added value for the customer, right?
Yeah.
And true commercial applications, right? So like coming back to my first company, AXDraft, right? I would probably focus heavily on like AI contract review, but in a way of AI contract review assistant versus like AI is going to do it for you. I would probably not go deep into like AI contract drafting because I think it's too difficult. But definitely kind of AI document analysis would be like a big thing. And I think there is something like that in every business. Like I would go into your software and try to talk to your customers and try to understand like what is the part in my software that people are spending the most manual work on, right? That could be, I don't know, like database search, that could be workflow setup, that could be all sorts of things. And then ask yourself, can I automate that with AI, right? If there's nothing like that, then talk to your customers and ask them, like, this is what you do with my software. Are there any adjacent tasks like before or after you interact with my software that you spend a lot of time on? And then ask yourself, can I automate that with AI, right? Because that would be a nice, smart, thought through way to build it into the workflow and product versus hey, like we are now offering an AI chatbot in our app, like
Yeah.
all support questions and it's going to answer, because that's just nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And especially uh, heard stories about companies like Klarna who have let go of Salesforce and Workday, and they are building the internal tools. Do you think going forward, a lot of companies are going to build in these sort of tools internally, like hire a third party company and solve that problem, or do you think this is like a one off thing?
So I have kind of two conflicting opinions on how I'm undecided yet, right? So on one end, I believe in what I mentioned before, which is the AI will lead to explosion of micro products,
Yeah.
right? Where basically it will be so easy to build a product that many people will be building their own products, including companies building their internal products, right? Like it makes sense. I think we're going to get there pretty soon.
Yeah.
But then I also think that fundamentally, there is more value to existing kind of market leaders like Salesforce than just the software itself. And at this point of time, that value is a whole stack of sales professionals who know how to use it, right? And that is
Right.
true for Salesforce, for HubSpot, for many, many other tools. And then once you kind of start building your own stuff, then it means that you basically are complicating the onboarding curve for the people, right, who should be using that software. And maybe it's so intuitive, it's not a problem, but it's rarely the case.
Hmm.
So I don't know how it's going to play out. And kind of what Klarna did made a lot of noise, but I've also seen many cases in the past where there was a lot of noise. And then like 2 years later, like that was a mistake. welcome back, Salesforce, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would not be surprised.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
I think that would be Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss,
Yeah.
because it's not a business book. It's a collection of very short notes and conversations and advice from top businessmen and or top leaders in different areas of business. And something that always kind of surprises me about this book is that I have a question, I can just like open it and I'm like, oh, that's a good answer. And then the other thing that surprises me is that how many things from industries outside of tech, outside of B2B, outside of entrepreneurship are actually really applicable and useful when you think about entrepreneurship and B2B tech, right? So this kind of
Mhm.
cross-referencing, like I just love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's also one of my favorite books. And what's your favorite online tool, anything other than AISDR?
So I use a lot of different AIs for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So I use Claude and I use ChatGPT, uh, and am still undecided. So I don't have like a favorite AI currently, but I use them every day for like a lot of different things, including their like desktop app to basically assist me with different things on a regular basis. And I'm also a power user of Loom. I record like videos very often.
Got it. Got it. We'll put that in the show notes. And, if you could go back in time when we started at AXDraft or ASDR, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done things differently?
Yeah, so with AXDraft, I would have started with Y Combinator versus
Mm,
like suffering for 2 years and then getting into Y Combinator. With another thing that I fixed in AISDR versus AXDraft was starting in the US, right? Because with AXDraft, I had this concept that you can start in your local market. For me, that was Ukraine at the point of time, then scale international. Like that's a lie. Like you can't do that. It doesn't apply. Like it's like starting from the scratch from day one. With the ISDR, I think I would like there will be definitely mistakes in retrospect, but we did a lot of things right. I think some of the mm, I'm just trying to like think what is the one thing that I would fix. Don't know. Honestly, like probably we slightly kind of delayed the multi-channel outreach, right?
mhm.
So we're like from the top players in the space, we were last to launch to go beyond email. We
Yeah.
probably could have done this sooner, but I had like very strong conviction that like we shouldn't do it, but then market pressure like pressured me into doing it. So
Got it. Got it. Interesting. And, what's the best way people can reach out to you and know more about ASDR?
LinkedIn, right? So Yuri
Yeah.
Zaremba, very active there. You can learn a lot more things from me by following me. And also, I just recently started my Twitter. It's YZ at like underscore AISDR. So you can check it out as well.
Got it. We'll put down in the show notes. Yuri, thank you so much for taking your time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thank you. Likewise.